Welcome to HFY Vanguard, where one human's mistake sparks a trial of love law and survival among the stars.
I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that.
Ridley Stripe had long ago stopped counting the number of times he'd banged his head on the cramped access tunnels of Skynode Station. The gravity generators never broke in the open, spacious promenades where delegates from across the galaxy strolled in gleaming robes. No, they always failed here in the steel bowels of the station, where a 6-foot-tall human had to crawl on his knees like a rat chasing loose wires. "Come on, you stubborn piece of junk," he muttered, his wrench slipping again. The metallic clang echoed down the shaft, followed by a low curse. The display flickered at him tauntingly, stable at 89% efficiency. Not enough for regulations. Not enough for Martinez, his perpetually impatient supervisor. The comm on his wrist buzzed. "Stripe, how's that calibration?" Martinez's gravelly voice filled the shaft. "Almost there, boss. Just need 15 minutes. Make it 10. We've got VIPs docking today. Last thing we need is a dignitary from the Andromedan Tribunal floating upside down in Sector 7. Ridley rolled his eyes, wiped sweat from his forehead, and kept twisting until the screen finally jumped to 98%. He blew out a long sigh of relief. Good enough. For a moment, he allowed himself a pause, peering through the tiny maintenance viewport. Earth hung below in all its blue and white majesty, a reminder that no matter how far he drifted home, was still there, spinning silently. 3 years stationed here, and the sight still made his chest tighten. Crawling out of the shaft, he slung his toolkit over one shoulder and stepped into the main promenade. The transition from greasy tunnels to Galactic Marketplace was always jarring. Aliens of a dozen shapes and textures crowded the wide concourse. Crystalline Centaurians refracted light into rainbow shards. Bulbous, Jovian merchants bellowed over trade rates. Spindly proxims shuffled nervously past towering reptilian warriors. Holoscreens displayed constant streams of galactic news in a dozen tongues. One headline caught Ridley's eye. "Earthman arrested for accidental contact with alien Duchess ignorance. No excuse." He snorted, pausing to watch the clip. The poor bastard, some businessman in a suit, was being dragged away by azure-skinned guards while protesting his innocence. "Yeah, good luck, buddy," Ridley muttered. The galaxy had 1,000 cultures and 1,000,000 laws. Earthlings were forever stepping on invisible tripwires. He turned down a quieter service corridor, longing for a shower and maybe a lukewarm beer. That's when fate intervened. A figure appeared suddenly from a side passage, tall and robed, moving with unearthly grace. Ridley tried to sidestep, but momentum betrayed him. His shoulder brushed against someone soft. Time slowed. He turned to apologize, and the words caught in his throat. She stood taller than him, flawless violet skin shimmering faintly under corridor lights, hair as white as starlight cascading down her back. But it was her eyes that stopped him, cold, entirely silver. No pupils, reflecting authority, wisdom, and something like shock. Ridley's mouth went dry. I'm so sorry I didn't." Before he could finish, 2 armored guards materialized, weapons raised. A hovering drone projected a glowing emblem in the air, the seal of the Galactic Tribunal. The woman's expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was like music wrapped in iron. "You touched me. It was an accident, I didn't mean." Her silver gaze sharpened. "Do you know who I am, Huma?" Recognition struck like a plasma bolt. He'd just seen the news scroll. The VIP Martinez had mentioned. High Judge Chris Tample, arbiter of the tribunal, a living legend. Ridley swallowed hard. "You're the High Judge. And do you know the laws of my people regarding physical contact?" His mind scrambled. "No, Your Honor, I know I don't." A crowd was gathering at both ends of the corridor, curious faces peering in devices already raised to record. The hovering drone spun projecting text in an alien script across the walls. Chris's voice carried clear and merciless. "On my world, unauthorized touch has only 2 interpretations. An act of aggression," she paused, letting the silence draw taut, "or a formal proposal of marriage." The air seemed to leave Ridley's lungs. "What?" The guards tightened their grips. One spoke into his comm, Sector 7, Level 3. "Summon legal advisor immediately." This has to be a joke, Ridley stammered, looking wildly around. I'm just a tech. I was heading back to my quarters, I didn't. The law, Chris interrupted, eyes glinting, is not a joke, Mr. Stripe. She pronounced his name carefully, almost musically. I am bound more strictly than most. To ignore this would undermine not just myself, but the tribunal itself. The crowd buzzed, devices flashed, Ridley's embarrassment twisted into panic. A new figure waddled forward, amphibian features glistening under the lights. The legal advisor clutching a tablet. He bowed low. Your Honor, according to Statute 247B of the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Treaty, when a Tamplean is touched by an unmarried individual, they must either press charges for assault or acknowledge the proposal of marriage. This is insane, Ridley blurted. I didn't propose anything. Ignorance, the advisor croaked, is no defense in Galactic Court. Chris's eyes bored into his. Would you prefer I charge you with assault, Mr. Stripe? Ridley's mind spun. Execution for assault, or... There is another way, Chris continued. The law allows a trial period. 1 night. The proposer must prove their worthiness as a mate. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some laughed. Others whispered reverently. Ridley's voice cracked. And if I fail, the amphibian adjusted his tablet. Then you will be executed for wasting the High Judge's time. The corridor swam. Ridley thought of the broken generator, the news clip, the businessman's haunted eyes. His choices were madness. Assault charges, attempted escape suicidal, or accept a trial that might end with his head on a tribunal pike. Chris studied him, silver eyes unblinking. 3 options, Mr. Stripe. Assault, trial, or flight. She nodded toward the guards. I don't recommend the third. Ridley raked a hand through his dark hair, heart pounding. He thought of Earth far below, hidden in clouds. He thought of how ridiculous this was, an ordinary maintenance man dragged into cosmic law over a bump in the corridor. And yet the corridor had fallen silent. Dozens of eyes, human and alien, watched, waiting, judging. Ridley squared his shoulders, though his knees trembled. I accept the trial. A flicker was that amusement crossed Chris's lips. Very well, my quarters, 2100 station time. Don't be late. She turned to robes flowing like liquid night. At the last moment she glanced back. And Mr. Stripe, do shower first. The crowd parted as she glided away, guards flanking her. The drone winked out, leaving Ridley alone with the amphibian advisor. That went better than expected, the creature croaked cheerfully. Usually they prefer the assault charges. Ridley groaned. Any advice? The advisor considered, then gave what might have been a sympathetic smile. Don't die. The crowd dispersed, still whispering. Ridley stared after them, numb. His comm buzzed again. Martinez's voice, Stripe. Where the hell are you? Sector 9's generator is acting up now. Ridley switched the comm off. Some problems would have to wait. 5 hours until trial. 5 hours to prepare for the strangest date of his life. Or his last night alive. Ridley Stripe sat on the edge of his bunk, still damp from the fastest shower of his life, staring at the wall as if it might offer him divine guidance. The standard issue quarters of Skynode Station weren't much to look at, a narrow-bedded desk with a flickering holoscreen and a tiny viewport where Earth spun silently in the void. Usually the sight gave him comfort. Now it just made him feel very small. 5 hours. Less than 5 hours now. He ran both hands through his hair, leaving it sticking up at odd angles. What the hell am I supposed to do with this? He muttered. Trial night, marriage proposal, execution. Sure, why not? Tuesday's as good a day as any to get vaporized. The door chimed. Ridley groaned. Come in, I guess. The door slid open and Eva Jan swept inside without waiting for permission. Her communications officer's uniform was wrinkled. Her black hair pulled back hastily as if she'd sprinted from the comm center. Tell me it's not true, she blurted. Ridley dropped his head into his hands. If by it you mean accidentally proposing to the most powerful alien judge in the galaxy, then yeah, it's true. Eva whistled low. Wow, only you, Stripe. The comm feeds are already buzzing. Maintenance tech declares love for High Judge in public. You're trending across half the civilized galaxy. Congratulations, lover boy. He lifted his head just enough to glare at her. I didn't declare anything. I tripped. I bumped her shoulder, that's all. Uh-huh. And according to Temple law, that's either assault or marriage. She plopped onto his desk, crossing her arms. Lucky you got the romantic option. Romantic? Ridley barked a laugh. Eva, if I screw this up tonight, I'm dead. As in executed for wasting her time. That's not romantic. That's insane. Eva tapped her chin. So don't screw it up. Great advice, thanks. Look, I dated an Aximan once. Whole culture was obsessed with protocol. Gifts, rituals, forms of address, everything mattered. Maybe it's the same with Tampelins. Bring her something. A gift. Show respect. Ridley blinked at her. What kind of gift do you give someone who can literally have you vaporized with a snap of her violet fingers? Flowers. She's probably allergic. Then I get executed for attempted assassination. Jewelry. I make 20 credits a week fixing gravity coils. You think I have a spare diamond lying around? Eva shrugged. Then improvise. You're good at that. Fixing broken junk with duct tape and swearing. Ridley rubbed his temples. This isn't a broken coffee machine, Eva. This is my life. Exactly, so treat it the same way. Fix it, somehow. She leaned forward, eyes softer now. Seriously, Red, just be yourself. You're funny. You're honest. You don't play games. That might actually impress her more than some alien ritual nonsense. Ridley sighed, but a reluctant smile tugged at his lips. Be myself, right? That's what got me into this mess in the first place. Her comm unit beeped. She grimaced. Duty calls. Look, good luck. And hey, if you survive, I want a front row seat at the wedding. Thanks for the vote of confidence. She squeezed his shoulder and slipped out, leaving him alone with his thoughts again. For the next hour, Ridley paced the room like a caged animal. He pulled up everything the station's computer could find about Tampelan culture, but most of it was classified or incomprehensible alien script. One article mentioned their obsession with ritual purity. Another hinted that touch was considered sacred, reserved only for the deepest bonds. Nothing useful about what a trial night actually involved. Figures, Ridley muttered, scrolling through line after line of nonsense. Clearance level 7 required. Of course, because why would a guy whose head is on the chopping block need access to survival tips? He flopped onto his bed, staring at the ceiling. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Son, everything breaks eventually. Machines, doors, people. The trick isn't preventing the break. The trick is knowing how to fix it. Ridley closed his eyes. Could he really fix this? Could he bridge the gap between a maintenance tech and an alien judge centuries old, bound by laws older than his planet's democracy? His comm buzzed again. Martinez's voice growled through. Stripe, where the hell are you? Sector 9's generator's acting up. Ridley thumbed it off without answering. For once, the generators could wait. By 1900s, the nerves had turned his stomach inside out. He forced himself to eat a ration bar, washed it down with stale water, and changed into his cleanest civilian clothes, a dark blue shirt and black pants. Not impressive, but at least not grease-stained overalls. He stood before the mirror, tugging at his collar. You look like a guy heading to his own funeral, he told his reflection. The reflection didn't argue. Computer, he said finally. Directions to High Judge Chris Tample's quarters. The holoscreen blinked. Diplomatic Wing Suite 17A. Security clearance required. Ridley groaned. Figures. The hours crawled by. He tried to distract himself by fiddling with his toolkit, tightening bolts that didn't need tightening. He pulled up Earth News, watched a clip of some senator back home pontificating about trade rights, and immediately regretted it. He tried a nap, failed. His nerves jolted him awake after 3 minutes. At 20:30, he gave up pretending. He brushed his teeth twice, straightened his shirt for the 10th time, and left his quarters. The diplomatic wing of Skynode was another universe compared to the technician barracks. The corridors were wide and gleaming, lined with elegant hollow art that shifted like liquid silver. The air smelled faintly of exotic perfumes. Guards in reflective armor stood every 20 paces, silent and unreadable. Ridley's shoes clicked too loudly on the polished floor. His palms were slick with sweat. Every guard's visor seemed to judge him. At last, he reached his Suite 17A. The same guards from earlier scanned him with scanners that hummed ominously as if they could read his soul. After a long pause, they stepped aside. The door slid open with a whisper. Ridley's breath caught. The suite was massive, easily 10 times the size of his quarters, with a panoramic window showing Earth below, like a jewel on black velvet. Furniture of curved metal and glass glimmered in shifting hues. Hollow sculptures rippled across the walls. And at the window stood Chris Tample. She had shed her official robes. Now she wore a form-fitting gown that shimmered between violet and silver as she moved. Her hair spilled like moonlight down her back. The sight was enough to make Ridley forget how to breathe. "You're punctual," she said without turning. Her voice was cool, measured. "That's something." Ridley hovered awkwardly near the door. "Your Honor?" "Chris," she interrupted, finally facing him. "Under the circumstances, we may dispense with titles." Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the starlight streaming through the window. Ridley swallowed hard. "Chris, right. I wanted to apologize for earlier. If I'd known." She raised a hand, silencing him. "Tell me, Ridley Stripe, why did you choose the trial? Most in your position would have taken the assault charges. At least that death is quick." The question caught him off guard. He scratched the back of his neck. "Honestly, I figured. If I'm gonna die either way, might as well try the option with slightly better odds." Her lips curved the faintest hint of amusement. "Honest. Refreshing. Most try to flatter me with poetry or claim they were overwhelmed by my beauty." Ridley blurted before he could stop himself. "Well, you are beautiful, but I try not to let that influence my survival strategies." A musical laugh escaped her, surprising them both. Ridley blinked. Maybe, just maybe, he had a chance after all. Ridley Stripe had faced plenty of broken machines in his life: shorted plasma coils, leaking coolant lines, gravity regulators with a suicidal streak. But none of those had prepared him for standing in the private suite of High Judge Chris Tample, a woman who could order his execution with a single word. The air itself seemed heavier here, perfumed and charged with a quiet, almost sacred energy. Chris gestured toward a curved sofa of gleaming metal and glass. "Sit." Ridley obeyed, perching at the edge, as though the furniture might collapse under the weight of his nerves. Chris crossed the room with slow, measured steps, her gown shimmering like molten silver. She poured 2 glasses from a crystal decanter filled with liquid that shifted colors as if it contained tiny galaxies. Nervous, she asked, handing him a glass. Ridley's fingers trembled as he took it. Terrified, actually. "Good," she said, settling across from him with effortless grace. "It means you understand the gravity of what you've stumbled into." He raised the glass to his lips, half expecting it to burn a hole through his tongue. Instead, it tasted like cool starlight, sharp and faintly sweet. He coughed anyway, which made her smile faintly. "You still haven't answered my question from earlier," she said. "Why choose the trial?" Ridley rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I fix things. It's what I do. If something breaks, I try to make it work again. I figured maybe, just maybe, I could fix this too." Her silver eyes studied him, unreadable. "Most men would grovel, beg, or run. Most men aren't dumb enough to trip into you in the first place," he muttered. To his surprise, she laughed, light, musical, and utterly at odds with the severe judge who had confronted him in the corridor. For a moment, the atmosphere shifted, less tribunal, more human. They spoke for a time about trivialities, his work with the generators, her travels across the tribunal's many worlds. But always the question hovered between them: what exactly did this trial entail? Chris finally set her glass down. "You are wondering what comes next." Ridley spread his hands helplessly. "The thought did cross my mind. I mean, is this dinner a legal deposition? A duel? You have to understand, humans don't usually treat bumping into someone as a marriage proposal." Her expression softened, but her voice remained firm. "For my people, touch is sacred. It is the deepest form of trust. To allow someone within reach is to invite them into your very essence. That is why our laws are absolute." Ridley considered that. "So when I accidentally brushed your shoulder, you crossed a boundary most would never dare," she finished. He grimaced. "Lucky me. Or unlucky. The trial exists to determine which." Ridley leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So what do I have to do? Sword fight your champions, recite ancient law, juggle starships." Chris tilted her head, regarding him as though weighing the very fabric of his soul. "The trial is not defined by spectacle. It is defined by honesty, by whether you can make me believe that fate, not misfortune, brought us together." He blinked. "That's vague. That is the point. Ridley felt his throat tighten. The silence stretched. He could feel the judgment of centuries in her eyes, a weight pressing down on him, heavier than any broken generator. So he did what he always did when panic threatened to strangle him. He reached for humor. Well, he said, setting down his glass, if I'm supposed to prove my worth, maybe I should start by introducing you to one of humanity's greatest cultural achievements. Her silver brows arched. And what would that be? Ridley strode across the room to the wall-mounted replicator unit. Computer authorization, Stripe 7 Delta, 2 classic cheeseburgers with all the trimmings, and he glanced at the decanter, then grinned 2 chocolate milkshakes. Authentic. The replicator hummed, lights flashing until 2 steaming plates and frosty glasses materialized. The rich, savory aroma filled the air. Chris rose, curiosity overtaking her aloof composure. What is this? This, Ridley declared solemnly, presenting her with a burger, is what happens when humans get very good at putting delicious things between bread. She examined it with the same seriousness she might apply to a complex legal code. We do not eat with our hands, she said at last. Then you've been missing out. Ridley took a huge bite, juices dripping down his fingers. He chewed with exaggerated bliss. Proper technique is just go for it. Chris hesitated. Then delicately she raised the burger to her lips and bit. Her silver eyes widened instantly. She chewed, swallowed, and took another bite, larger this time. This is, she trailed off, searching for the word. Remarkable. Ridley grinned. Told you. Moments later she tried the milkshake. Her expression when the cold, sweet cream hit her tongue was worth the risk of execution. How is this not illegal? She demanded, taking another long sip. Probably because you haven't ruled on it yet, Ridley said. For the first time that night, Chris laughed openly, a free, joyous sound that echoed around the suite. The burgers disappeared quickly. Conversation flowed easier, now lubricated by milkshakes and laughter. Ridley told her about Seattle rainstorms, about fixing bikes with his father, about his sister's disastrous cooking experiments. She listened with genuine fascination, asking questions about the smallest details, as if starships and tribunals had never given her answers worth remembering. Finally, he asked the question that had been nagging him since the quarter. Why me? Why not just call it assault and be done with it? Her laughter faded. She stared into her glass, swirling the last of the milkshake. Because when you touched me, even by accident, it was the first time in over a century that anyone had done so without fear. Ridley's chest tightened. She looked suddenly less like a goddess draped in silver and more like a lonely soul walled off by reverence and law. 4 centuries, she whispered. 4 centuries of judgment, respect, fear. Not one soul daring to reach out. Until you. Ridley swallowed hard. Chris. Her eyes met his, luminous, with something fragile, something terrifyingly human. That is why you are here. To prove whether that moment was fate or folly. Ridley felt the weight of her words settle like a mantle across his shoulders. Fate or folly. Connection or death. He wanted to say something clever, something brave. Instead, he simply said, I'll try. Good, she replied softly. She stood, gown shifting like liquid starlight, and moved closer. Ridley's breath caught. The distance between them shrank until he could see the subtle patterns glowing faintly across her violet skin, like constellations etched into flesh. The trial, she said, voice lower now, is only beginning. The suite's lights dimmed, earth rotating slowly in the window beyond. The starlight bathed them both, casting long shadows that intertwined. And Ridley realized with sudden clarity, this wasn't about law or duty or survival anymore. This was about 2 souls colliding in the vast emptiness of the galaxy and what might be born from that collision. For the first time since the accident, he no longer felt like a man awaiting judgment. He felt like a man standing on the edge of something vast, terrifying, and wondrous. The suite had gone quiet, but not with the oppressive silence of a courtroom. It was something more delicate, more dangerous, like standing on the edge of a cliff, where one step meant flight, the other meant a fall into oblivion. Chris Tample stood close enough that Ridley could see the faint, bioluminescent veins tracing patterns beneath her violet skin, glowing and fading like a constellation breathing. Her silver eyes never wavered. You know the law of my people, she said softly. The first touch is a proposal. Ridley's mouth went dry. He nodded, remembering the chaos of the corridor, the accidental brush of shoulders that had rewritten his fate. The second touch, she continued, her voice carrying the weight of centuries as acceptance. The words hung between them like a drawn blade. Ridley's thoughts tumbled over themselves. Acceptance. Did she mean his acceptance of her? Her acceptance of him? Either way, the consequence was the same, no going back. And if I don't, he asked, more to stall than anything else. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. Then the trial ends, one way or another. The implication was clear. Failure meant death. Ridley swallowed hard. He thought of his father's mantra, everything breaks, but everything can be fixed. Could he fix this? Could he bridge a gulf, not just of species, but of centuries of law of expectation? His instincts screamed at him to retreat. But another voice, quieter, steadier, rose in his chest. He'd always been a fixer, a risk-taker, even if the risks were usually with power circuits, not alien judges. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his hand. Chris did not move. Ridley's palm hovered an inch from her chest, where faint light pulsed like the beat of a distant star. His fingers trembled. Then he closed the gap. Contact. Her skin was warm. No more than warm. It thrummed with energy, like touching the hull of a starship as it spooled up its drives. Light blossomed from the point of contact, racing across her body in rippling patterns of gold and violet. Chris gasped, a small, sharp intake of breath, as if the touch unlocked something she had long forgotten. Ridley's heart hammered. I guess that's the second touch, huh? Her silver eyes shone brighter than the stars outside. Yes, she whispered. It is. The world seemed to shift around them. The suite's gravity flickered, then lessened, as though the room itself held its breath. Ridley felt his feet lift slightly from the floor, and then he was floating weightless, still tethered to her by the warmth of her skin. Chris smiled faintly at his startled expression. Judge's privilege, she murmured. Ridley chuckled nervously. Show off. But the laughter died, quickly replaced by something rawer, deeper. They floated closer, caught in an orbit of their own making. Chris raised her other hand, brushing his cheek with fingertips that glowed faintly against his stubble. Do you understand what this means, human? He nodded, though his throat was tight. That I'm either very brave or very stupid. Both, perhaps. Her voice dropped lower, intimate. But you are not afraid of me. That is new. Ridley looked into her silver eyes, saw not just power and judgment, but weariness, longing, loneliness stretching back centuries. Maybe I should be afraid, but I'm not. Because right now, you don't scare me. You amaze me. Her lips parted slightly, a breath catching in her chest. For all her authority, for all her centuries of command, in that moment she looked vulnerable. Ridley leaned forward, closing the last inch between them. Their lips met. The kiss was electric, literally. Her skin pulsed with light patterns, swirling wildly, illuminating the entire suite in a kaleidoscope of color. Ridley felt the charge ripple through him, not painful but exhilarating, as if the universe itself had threaded a wire between their souls. Chris pressed closer, her body glowing brighter with every heartbeat. The gown shimmered, clung, then seemed irrelevant. They drifted together, entwined, weightless, in a private cosmos of their own. For Ridley, the galaxy shrank down to this single connection. The taste of her lips, the hum of her skin, the unbelievable reality that he, a grease-stained maintenance tech, was holding the most powerful judge in the galaxy in his arms. And for Chris, centuries of distance and formality dissolved in a rush of sensation she had never dared allow herself to feel. When at last they drew apart, breathless, Earth spun serenely in the viewport behind them. Chris's silver eyes still glowed, but softer now, almost tender. You realize, she said, voice trembling in a way Ridley had never heard before. There is no undoing this. We are bound now, by law, by touch, by choice. Ridley gave a shaky grin. Guess I've always had commitment issues, but this time I think I can handle it. Her laugh was low, musical, but edged with disbelief. You face death and still you joke. It's kind of my thing, he admitted. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw. Perhaps that is why I did not execute you the moment you touched me. Ridley sobered. Was that really your first instinct? Yes, she didn't flinch from the truth. 4 centuries of power teach you to eliminate threats. But when you touched me, I felt something I had not felt in a lifetime. Not fear, not reverence, connection. Ridley's chest tightened. He placed his hand gently over hers. Then maybe that's what we're supposed to fix tonight. Not just laws, not just cultures, but loneliness. Her eyes softened, and for once she did not argue. The rest of the night unfolded in waves, conversation, and laughter, tentative touches growing bolder silences that spoke louder than words. Chris shared fragments of her life, her first trial centuries ago. The endless weight of judgment, the crushing solitude of being untouchable. Ridley, in turn, told her of Earth, of greasy diners at midnight, of patching old hoverbikes with his dad, of his sister Dana, who could out-argue any lawyer alive, of small, ordinary things that painted a picture of a world Chris had judged from afar but never truly known. They floated together in half-gravity, sipping the last of the alien starlight liquor, and milkshakes alternating between solemn revelations and ridiculous jokes. Ridley made her laugh until she doubled over, silver eyes sparkling with mirth. She made him ache with the sheer depth of her gaze, the way she saw straight through his defenses. When at last the sweet dimmed fully into simulated night, they lay entangled on one of the floating couches, her head resting on his chest, her skin still faintly glowing with bioluminescent aftershocks. Ridley stared up at the ceiling, utterly dazed. "So, did I pass the trial?" Chris tilted her head, studying him with a mixture of exasperation and affection. "Do you really need to ask?" "Hey, I like to be thorough in my work." Her laugh was muffled against his chest. "Then yes, Ridley Stripe, you passed." He closed his eyes, relief washing over him. For the first time since the accident, the crushing weight lifted. He was alive, more than alive. He was bound. And somewhere deep in his gut, he realized that this wasn't just survival anymore. This was the beginning of something he hadn't dared hope for, something that might just change the galaxy. Ridley Stripe had thought the hard part was over. He had survived the night, passed the trial, and even managed to make the most powerful alien judge in the galaxy laugh over cheeseburgers and milkshakes. By all rights, the universe should have cut him a break. But the universe, as usual, had other plans. By morning, the comm feeds were ablaze. Human maintenance worker seduces, High Judge Earthling exploits, tribunal, marriage law scandal on Skynode. His name was everywhere, accompanied by grainy, hollow footage of his accidental bump in the corridor. By the time the guards arrived to escort him, Ridley was already dressed and resigned. The look on Chris's face as she joined him told him everything. The storm was just beginning. The council chamber was vast, an arena of crystalline walls that refracted light into endless patterns. Hundreds of delegates filled the tiers, voices a low murmur that rose and fell like a restless sea. At the center, under a harsh spotlight, stood Ridley, hands bound by humming energy cuffs that prickled his skin. Chris occupied her judicial podium, towering above robes once again immaculate. Yet her expression was tight, her silver eyes stormy. She looked less like the woman who had laughed with him in the quiet of her suite, and more like the unyielding High Judge again. "Proceed," intoned the council's presiding voice. A tall, scaled being stepped forward at metallic plates glinting under the lights. High Counselor Valter. His presence oozed disdain, his voice sharp as razors. "This human," Valter declared, gesturing with a clawed hand, "has manipulated our sacred laws for personal gain. He engineered his so-called accidental contact in order to entrap Judge Tample and by extension compromise the authority of this council." Gas rippled across the chamber. Holocam zoomed in on Ridley's bewildered face. "That's a lie," Ridley snapped before he could stop himself. The energy cuff shocked him for speaking out of turn. He grimaced, biting back a curse. Valter's scales rippled smugly. "See, disrespectful, undisciplined. A maintenance worker who dares imagine himself worthy of binding to a high judge." Chris's voice rang out cold and commanding. "These accusations are absurd. Mr. Stripe has broken no law. The touch was accidental and the trial was lawfully conducted. He proved himself worthy." Valter turned his slit-pupiled eyes on her. "Or perhaps your judgment is compromised. Perhaps you are enthralled." The chamber erupted into whispers. Ridley's stomach dropped. Chris's silver eyes narrowed dangerously. "Careful, counselor." But Valter pressed on. "For centuries you have rejected all suitors, and now suddenly you accept a human, a technician. Unless," his voice grew oily, unless he is no ordinary human at all. Ridley blinked. Wait, what? Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors crashed open. A woman strode in black coat, billowing behind her presence, so commanding that several delegates actually rose in deference. She moved like a blade, unsheathed, sharp, purposeful, impossible to ignore. Ridley groaned. Oh, hell. Dana, he muttered under his breath. His sister ignored him, her dark eyes locked on Walter. Are you finished embarrassing yourself, counselor? Walter faltered, his scales losing some of their gleam. Lady Stripe, I had no idea. Clearly. Dana's voice could have frozen plasma. She walked straight to the center of the chamber, drawing every gaze with her. You're attempting to execute my brother without bothering to check his lineage. A stunned silence followed. Whispers hissed through the tears like fire through dry grass. Ridley tugged at his cuffs. Dana, please don't. Shut up, Rid. She didn't even glance at him. With a flick of her wrist, she produced a sleek throwing knife and hurled it across the chamber. It spun through the air, slicing cleanly through Ridley's restraints before embedding itself in the crystalline wall behind him. The cuffs sparked and fell to the floor. Show off, Ridley muttered, rubbing his freed wrists. The chamber erupted into chaos, shouts, gasps, delegates scrambling to record every second. Chris's silver eyes widened, caught between shock and something like awe. Would someone please explain what is happening? Dana turned to her brother with a smirk. Forgot to mention the family name. Huh, Rid. Ridley sighed. I was trying to keep a low profile. Walter's voice cracked as he stammered, The Stripe dynasty? That's impossible. Impossible, Dana barked a laugh. Tell that to our grandfather. He practically wrote half your precious laws. And he is not pleased about this farce. The chamber gasped as one. The Stripe dynasty, founders of the first Earth treaties, architects of half the interstellar code. Legends whispered about but rarely seen. Chris turned to Ridley, her expression a storm of confusion and betrayal. You're one of them. Ridley met her gaze steady despite the chaos. Former heir. I walked away. I just wanted to fix things, not play politics. Dana snorted. Yeah, and ended up fixing gravity coils on a rust bucket station. Real downgrade, brother. Chris descended from her podium robes, flowing eyes burning. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Ridley asked quietly. Would you have trusted that last night wasn't a ploy? That it wasn't about power or influence or legacy, but about us? The chamber quieted again, all ears on their exchange. Even Walter seemed momentarily silenced. Chris's lips parted, but no words came. The bioluminescent glow at her temples flickered uncertainly. Dana's grin faded, replaced by something gentler. She addressed Chris directly. Judge Tample, my brother has turned down more power than most beings dream of. He chose to walk away. If he chose you, then maybe you should believe him. Ridley shifted uncomfortably. Dana, you're not helping as much as you think. I'm helping enough, she shot back. Walter, regaining his composure, sneered. You expect us to believe this? That a Stripe heir just happened to stumble into Judge Tample? A convenient accident? Dana's gaze snapped to him, lethal. Careful, counselor. Unless you want me to tell the chamber who funded that assassination attempt yesterday. The delegates erupted again, voices clashing in uproar. Walter's scales dulled to a sickly gray. He stammered incoherently, sweat beading on his brow. Chris's eyes widened, realization dawning. You? Walter backed away, but it was too late. The council's enforcers were already moving. As the chamber dissolved into chaos, delegates shouting, enforcers restraining Walter, Ridley stood in the center, utterly still. Chris approached him slowly, robes whispering against the crystalline floor. You should have told me, she said, her voice softer now. Ridley looked her straight in the eyes. Would it have changed how you saw me? She hesitated. Yes and no. I didn't want a judge to see me as a dynasty. I wanted you to see me a me. Just a guy trying to fix what's broken. Her expression softened, the storm in her silver eyes easing. She reached out her fingers, brushing his arm. Bioluminescent patterns flickered faintly at the contact. You infuriate me. Yeah, Ridley said with a crooked grin. I get that a lot. Dana cleared her throat, drawing every eye again. Counselors, I suggest you reconsider your accusations. Unless you want to explain to the galaxy why you tried to execute the heir of a founding dynasty over a shoulder bump. The presiding voice boomed, strained. The council officially withdraws its accusations against Ridley Stripe. All charges are void. Walter sagged in the grip of enforcers humiliated. Ridley exhaled slowly, relief flooding him. He turned to Chris. So, pancakes. For a heartbeat, she simply stared. Then, to the astonishment of the entire chamber, she laughed a bright, unguarded laugh that echoed across the crystalline walls. Yes, she said, taking his hand, pancakes. The council chamber emptied in a storm of whispers and hurried messages, but Ridley barely noticed. The words all charges, void still rang in his ears, almost surreal. Hours ago, he'd been a dead man walking. Now he stood hand in hand with High Judge Chris Tample while half the galaxy scrambled to rewrite its talking points. The remaining delegates filed out in a rush, their robes fluttering like frightened birds. Even Walter, dragged away by enforcers, could only hiss empty threats, his scales dulled to a pitiful gray. When the last echoes faded, Ridley turned to Chris. The silver glow of her eyes softened their intensity, tempered by something warmer. So he said, voice dry, do I at least get a certificate, something for the fridge? Congratulations, survived trial by marriage law. Her lips curved despite herself. You infuriate me, Ridley Stripe. Do you know that? Yeah, he said with a grin. But admit it, you'd miss it. Outside the chamber, the press storm awaited. Dozens of holocams flared, reporters of every species shouting over one another, hungry for the story of the Millennium High Judge Wed's human maintenance worker. Chris raised a hand and silence fell instantly. Her authority was a gravity field all its own. This union, she declared, was forged not by politics or manipulation, but by the oldest law of all connection. You may speculate, but know this, he is mine and I am his. The tribunal's judgment stands. Gasps, applause, outrage. It didn't matter. The words were spoken. Ridley leaned close, muttering under his breath. That's going to haunt the headlines for years. Good, she replied without flinching. Let them. The wedding. 3 months later, Seattle smelled of rain. The city's skyline shimmered in gray drizzle as dignitaries from 100 worlds descended on Earth for a wedding unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Ridley had argued for something small, courthouse, maybe pancakes afterward, but Chris had insisted on something symbolic. Neutral ground, Earth soil, a reminder that even a maintenance worker's homeworld mattered. So they stood beneath a canopy strung with glowing orbs that cast soft light on the gathered guests. Chris wore a gown that seemed woven from starlight itself, her violet skin luminous against the gray sky. Ridley wore a simple suit, no frills, just him. That was enough. Dana served as honor guard, her black coat traded for ceremonial armor, a wicked grin plastered on her face. If anyone objects, she announced, resting a hand on her blade. Speak now and enjoy your last words. No one objected. The ceremony was short, but the roar of applause afterwards shook the air. Even the rain seemed to pause, hanging in silver threads, as if the world itself wanted to bear witness. And in the back row, unnoticed by most, an elderly figure with eyes like burning stars watched in silence. Grandfather Stripe. He smiled faintly, then vanished before anyone could approach. A gift too large. 2 weeks later, a transmission arrived. It bore the crest of the Stripe dynasty. To my grandson and his chosen mate, the message intoned in a deep, resonant voice that made the station walls vibrate. I offer a wedding gift worthy of our name, a moon, entirely uninhabited, yours to command. Ridley groaned when he read it aloud. A moon, seriously, what am I supposed to do with a moon plant tomatoes? Chris's laughter filled their quarters. You could donate it, a sanctuary perhaps, which is exactly what they did. The moon was quietly transferred to a refugee trust, becoming a safe haven for displaced colonies. Ridley slept better knowing at least one oversized family heirloom was put to good use. Life on Skynode. Their quarters became famous almost overnight. Not for wealth or grandeur, but for two very specific things. The most efficiently functioning systems on the entire station. Ridley couldn't stop tinkering. Even the ancient water recyclers purred like kittens under his touch. The smell of pancakes every morning drifting through the hallways and confusing diplomats from across the galaxy. Visitors would step inside expecting solemnity and instead find Chris sitting cross-legged at the table in casual robes, devouring a stack of syrup-drenched pancakes with suspicious eagerness while Ridley flipped another batch. Why do you indulge him? One ambassador asked once. Chris's silver eyes twinkled. Because pancakes are worth more than poetry in dead languages. Ridley grinned. See, told you. Conversations in the quiet. At night, when the station quieted and the stars spilled endless across the viewport, they spoke of heavier things. Chris confessed her doubts. Centuries of isolation had carved deep lines of solitude into her soul. Could she truly balance the mantle of High Judge with the vulnerability of being a partner? Ridley listened, then told her the truth. I don't want to change who you are. I just want to be the guy who fixes the leaks when the galaxy forgets to. She smiled at that, the faint glow along her temples brightening. And who fixes you, Ridley Stripe? He squeezed her hand. Guess that's your job now. A whisper of trouble, but peace never lasted long. One evening, as Ridley adjusted the calibration on their suite's gravity plate, because of course he couldn't stop working, Dana arrived unannounced. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, expression half amused, half grim. You look cozy. Ridley sighed. What do you want, Dana? To warn you, her voice dropped. Grandfather's impressed you survived, but he's also worried, and when he worries, people tend to disappear. Chris rose, her silver eyes narrowing. Is this a threat? No. Dana's gaze softened just slightly. It's a promise. He's going to test you both. Something about a stolen quantum artifact. He called it an impossible mission. Ridley groaned. Of course he did. Can't just let me make pancakes in peace. Dana smirked. Peace isn't what you were born for, brother. But don't worry, I'll be around to bail you out. Again. She turned to leave, then paused, glancing at Chris. You're good for him. Don't let the galaxy tell you otherwise. Then she was gone, coat swirling behind her. The dawn of something new. Later that night, Ridley stood by the viewport, watching Earth rotate far below. Chris joined him, slipping her hand into his. Her skin glowed faintly where they touched. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. He frowned. Regret what? This. Us, the law that bound us. The council. The endless eyes watching. Ridley thought for a long moment. Then he shook his head. No, because the law didn't bind us. We did. With cheeseburgers and milkshakes and pancakes. The rest is just noise. Her smile was soft, unguarded, the kind she reserved only for him. You are ridiculous. And you love it. Yes, she whispered, silver eyes shimmering. I do. They stood in silence, watching dawn creep across the curve of the Earth, golden light spilling into the void. The galaxy outside was vast, full of politics, conspiracies, and missions waiting to disrupt their fragile peace. But in this moment, in this quiet dawn, Ridley Stripe, the maintenance man who had once feared death by shoulder bump, and High Judge Chris Tample, the untouchable arbiter of law, were simply two people who had found each other against all odds. And sometimes Ridley thought that was enough. Epilogue. They say in space no one can hear you scream. But if you listen carefully on Skynode Station at breakfast time, you might just hear the sound of someone laughing over pancakes.
Yeah, this is my life, my strife, my right to fight, to die on. And this is my game to play, to claim a brand new name, oh. And